Introduction to the Enigma of Consciousness. Welcome to Lecture 26, where we embark on a journey into perhaps the most profound mystery of existence: consciousness. What is this ethereal essence that animates our perceptions, thoughts, and feelings? How does a collection of neurons, mere physical matter, give rise to the rich tapestry of subjective experience that defines each moment of our awareness? The question of consciousness has haunted philosophers, scientists, and spiritual seekers throughout human history. It remains the ultimate enigma, a puzzle that bridges the physical and metaphysical realms of understanding. Today, we venture into this labyrinth of mystery, not with the expectation of finding definitive answers, but to explore the questions that illuminate the boundaries of human knowledge. As the philosopher David Chalmers famously articulated, the hard problem of consciousness is the problem of explaining why any physical state is conscious rather than non-conscious. This isn't merely a scientific question, it's a doorway into the very nature of reality and our place within it. Historical perspectives on the mind. Before we delve into modern theories, let's briefly trace consciousness through the corridors of history. The ancient Greeks conceptualized psyche as the animating force of life. Eastern philosophies explored consciousness as fundamental to reality rather than emergent from it. Descartes famously declared, "I think, therefore I am," establishing consciousness as the irrefutable foundation of existence. What's fascinating is how persistent this mystery has been across millennia of human inquiry. Despite our exponential growth in understanding the physical universe, from quantum particles to distant galaxies, the nature of our own inner experience remains stubbornly elusive. The ancient mind-body problem has evolved, but never disappeared. How does immaterial thought interact with the physical brain? Is consciousness a byproduct of complex neural activity or something more fundamental to the cosmos? These questions hover at the periphery of our understanding, beckoning us toward the unknown. The hard problem and the explanatory gap in contemporary philosophy of mind, we encounter what David Chalmers termed the hard problem of consciousness. This isn't about mapping neural correlates or understanding cognitive functions. These are what he calls the easy problems. The hard problem asks why and how physical processes in the brain give rise to subjective experience at all. Consider the experience of seeing the color crimson, feeling the ache of loneliness, or savoring the taste of dark chocolate. These qualia, the subjective, qualitative aspects of experience, seem impossible to reduce to neurochemical equations or computational models. This creates what philosopher Joseph Levine called the explanatory gap. Even with complete knowledge of the brain's physical processes, something seems left unexplained: the first-person experience itself. It's as though consciousness inhabits a dimension that our current scientific frameworks cannot fully capture or explain. Dualism versus materialism. Throughout philosophical history, two major positions have dominated the consciousness debate: dualism and materialism. Dualism, as championed by Descartes, proposes that mind and matter are fundamentally different substances. Consciousness, in this view, exists in a non-physical realm that somehow interfaces with the physical brain. While intuitive to many, dualism struggles to explain how these two realms causally interact. How can the non-physical influence the physical without violating the laws of physics? Materialism, by contrast, holds that consciousness is wholly physical, a product of brain activity with no non-physical components. Yet materialists face the formidable challenge of explaining how arrangements of neurons, no matter how complex, generate subjective experience. Between these positions lie various hybrid theories: property dualism, neutral monism, panpsychism, each attempting to bridge the seemingly unbridgeable gap between the physical and the experiential. The persistence of this debate suggests we may need conceptual revolutions as profound as those that gave us quantum mechanics to truly understand consciousness. Higher-order theories of consciousness. Higher-order theories propose that consciousness emerges when the brain monitors its own mental states. In this view, what makes an experience conscious is not the experience itself, but our awareness of having that experience. Consider the difference between absent-mindedly driving a familiar route versus actively noticing your surroundings. The same sensory information may be processed, but consciousness arises from that second-order awareness of the process. These theories elegantly explain certain phenomena, like how we can process information without consciously perceiving it, but they risk an infinite regress problem. If consciousness requires awareness of mental states, what makes that awareness itself conscious? Does it require yet another level of awareness? The mystery deepens with each layer of explanation. The enigma persists. How does this self-reflective loop generate the seemingly magical property of subjective experience? What transforms neural activity into the felt presence of consciousness? Global workspace and integrated information, modern scientific theories, have attempted to reframe the consciousness question in terms accessible to empirical investigation. The global workspace theory, developed by Bernard Bars, suggests consciousness emerges when information is broadcast widely throughout the brain, making it available to multiple cognitive systems simultaneously. Like a theater spotlight illuminating certain actors on a stage, only information in the global workspace enters conscious awareness. Giulio Tononi's integrated information theory takes a different approach, proposing that consciousness corresponds to a system's capacity to integrate information, measured by a value called phi. Complex systems with high information integration, like the human brain, generate consciousness, while simpler systems with less integration do not. These theories provide frameworks for studying consciousness scientifically, but critics argue they explain the functional aspects of consciousness without addressing the hard problem. Why is this integration or broadcasting accompanied by subjective experience at all? Quantum theories of consciousness. Some theorists have looked to the mysterious realm of quantum physics for explanations of consciousness. The most famous example is the orchestrated objective reduction, OR, theory proposed by physicist Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff. This theory suggests that quantum computations in microtubules within neurons create consciousness through quantum coherence, a state where quantum particles maintain a special connection regardless of distance. When these quantum states collapse, they produce moments of conscious experience. While intriguing, these theories remain highly speculative. Critics argue that the warm, wet environment of the brain would prevent quantum coherence from being maintained long enough to influence neural processing. Yet the very weirdness of quantum mechanics, with its observer effects and non-locality, seems to echo the mysterious, non-reducible nature of consciousness itself. Could the deepest mysteries of physics and consciousness be intertwined? The answer remains tantalizingly beyond our grasp. Neural correlates of consciousness. While philosophical questions linger, neuroscience has made remarkable progress identifying the neural correlates of consciousness, the brain activities that correspond to conscious experience. Research points to the importance of the cerebral cortex, particularly recurrent processing between higher and lower cortical areas. The prefrontal cortex, with its role in working memory and executive function, appears especially crucial for self-awareness and reflective consciousness. Fascinating studies of patients with brain damage reveal consciousness's fragile nature. Split brain patients demonstrate how unified consciousness can be disrupted, while blind sight shows how visual processing can occur without conscious perception. Yet correlations aren't explanations. Identifying which neural activities accompany consciousness doesn't explain why those activities generate experience. We face what philosopher Thomas Nagel called the subjectivity problem. No amount of third-person data seems sufficient to capture the first-person reality of what it's like to be conscious. The binding problem, one of consciousness's most perplexing aspects, is its unified nature. We don't experience color separate from shape or visual information separate from sound. Instead, consciousness presents a seamless, integrated reality. This is the binding problem. How does the brain bind together information processed in different regions to create unified conscious experiences? How do distributed neural processes become the singular stream of consciousness we experience? Various solutions have been proposed, from temporal synchrony, neurons firing in rhythm, to hierarchical integration in higher brain regions. Yet each raises new questions about the mechanisms that transform multiple parallel processes into a unified experience. The binding problem hints at consciousness's essentially holistic nature, It cannot be reduced to its components without losing something essential. Like a symphony that is more than the sum of individual notes, consciousness emerges as an integrated whole that transcends its neural parts. Altered states of consciousness, perhaps the most revealing window into consciousness, comes through altered states, conditions where normal awareness transforms into something radically different. Dreams immerse us in constructed realities indistinguishable from waking life while we're experiencing them. Meditation reveals how consciousness can observe itself, creating states of meta-awareness that transcend ordinary perception. Psychedelic experiences dissolve boundaries between self and world, suggesting consciousness may be more fluid than our everyday experience indicates. Near-death experiences raise profound questions about consciousness's relationship to the physical brain. How can people report vivid, structured experiences when their brains show minimal activity? Are these merely hallucinations produced by a dying brain, or glimpses of consciousness persisting beyond physical processes? Each altered state offers a unique vantage point from which to contemplate the mystery of normal consciousness. Like studying shadows to understand the objects casting them, or exploring darkness to comprehend the nature of light. The future of consciousness research, as we look toward the horizon of consciousness research, new technologies promise unprecedented insights. Advanced neuroimaging techniques allow us to observe the living brain with increasing precision. Artificial intelligence raises provocative questions about whether consciousness could emerge in non-biological systems. Will we someday create conscious machines? How would we recognize machine consciousness if it emerged? These questions force us to refine our understanding of what consciousness truly is. The ethical dimensions of consciousness research grow increasingly complex. If consciousness exists on a spectrum rather than as a binary property, how should we treat beings with different forms or degrees of consciousness? From non-human animals to potential artificial minds, our expanding understanding challenges traditional ethical boundaries. As technologies like brain-computer interfaces advance, we may eventually bridge the gap between first and third-person perspectives on consciousness, perhaps even directly sharing subjective experiences across minds. Conclusion: the enduring mystery as our exploration comes to a close, we find ourselves where we began, face to face with the profound mystery of consciousness. Despite centuries of inquiry and decades of neuroscientific advances, the hard problem remains as challenging as ever. Perhaps this persistent mystery reveals something fundamental about consciousness itself, that it represents a kind of knowledge fundamentally different from our understanding of the physical world. As philosopher Thomas Nagel suggested, consciousness may require a new kind of thinking that transcends our current conceptual frameworks. Or perhaps, as some Eastern philosophical traditions suggest, consciousness isn't something to be explained from the outside, but realized from within. The mystery may not be a puzzle to solve, but a reality to be experienced more deeply. I invite you to carry this mystery forward, not as a frustration, but as an invitation to wonder. In a universe where consciousness exists at all, perhaps the most appropriate response is not explanation, but astonishment. After all, you don't just study consciousness, you are consciousness, exploring itself. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the enigma at the heart of existence.